Tony, you with us?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
okay, and everybody in the waiting room has been admitted, so I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman, and the recording secretary.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Harrell, you can take it away with the attendance.
Good evening, everyone. If I mispronounce your name, just correct me. Lebna Allen. I received an email. They're out today. Carl Baxter. I received an email from Mr. Carl. He's out today. Dr. Christopher Blakely.
Present.
Corey Bright Kerrigan. Ken Burns. Laura Cristofanti.
Right here.
Crystal Seisken. Rosa Ganes. Dr. Haitham Mahmoud.
Yes. How's everybody doing?
Well, thank
Very
you.
good, thank you.
Dr. Peter Danuki.
Yes, please.
Dennis Quisenberry.
Present.
Anne Reed.
Present.
Nathan Watts. And Sean Williams.
Present.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Carroll. Okay, next we have the approval of the agenda. We would take a look at that, and then we're going to take a vote. And if you are the person making the motion for the votes tonight, please state your name when you make your motion so that Ms. Carroll can record it.
Mr. Chairman, I move that my name is Peter Diangui, and I move that we adopt the agenda as it is.
Thank you.
Sean Williams would second that.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Next, we're going to move to the approval of the minutes. Same concept, please state your name when making your motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the committee needs to conduct a vote to finalize the motion on the floor for the approval
Yes.
of the agenda.
I always forget that. All right, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That's why I keep Mr. Edie around, keeps me on my toes. All right, moving on to the approval of the minutes. You have a motion to approve the minutes.
So made, Sean Williams.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Anne Reed, second.
That.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Ms. Carroll, did you get what you needed?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
All right. All right, so first on our agenda tonight, we have Dr. Spiro here, Chief Academic Officer. He has some information to present to us on school reopening. So Mr. Spiro, if you're ready, the floor is yours. Sorry, Dr. Spiro, if you're ready.
I do appreciate it's fine to see everybody this evening, even via Zoom. And I know I did speak with Mr. Edie, and he said that this committee is well aware of the options that we have provided our parents for the return back to school. And so what I want to talk to you a little bit about today is just where we are in the process. And so we have begun a teacher task force that has been working on our Lee Home Connect program. And remember, Lee Home Connect are for students who decide to stay home to do their education virtually, but they're tied to a teacher at their regularly assigned schools. So we had a task force of about 55 teachers from all zones, all levels, meaning elementary, middle, high, and special centers that are part of this task force. And this group of teachers are working on creating the best practices, looking at our pacing guides that we have in place, and providing guidance to the district on some of the best tools that our teachers can use. Now we are continuing to work on that. We started last week. The teachers will work again all through this week. and have a plan in place, or instructional continuity plan, that we will provide teachers next week. And in that plan will be links to the resources that they've used, guidance on procedures that are in place. So there were 3 overarching areas really this group's been working on: instructional practices, equity and access, and then of course processes and procedures. And so that group will have a final product in place that they'll share with teachers next week. In addition, we have a teacher in this group that's going to do a model lesson. We're going to videotape a teacher with some students showing how Lee Connect works with students and the teachers at home. And this video really will be for our teachers so that they can see, as they're preparing when they get back to school next week. They'll have 2 weeks before they see students, kind of just the end product. What could this possibly look like? And all of this is teacher driven. And I think that's the most important part. You know, we have, it's the boots on the ground, our teachers that are providing the guidance for us. So I wanted to let you know that's where we are with our Lee Home Connect, but let me give you an update on where we are with our numbers. And so I pulled our numbers as of this morning, so kind of give you a sense of where students have selected to return back to school. So as of today, we have about 11,200 students that have elected to do Lee Virtual School. And so they're directly assigned to Lee Virtual School. We have about 10,300 students who right now have not responded. And so there could be a couple reasons why those families did not respond to the survey that was sent out. One, we did tell parents that if they did not complete the survey, their child would automatically default to face-to-face. So we think that might be one. But meanwhile, every school has been reaching out to these families, and they will continue to do so over the course of this week. So we'll see that number change. Just re-asking families, making sure that we know what their instructional model choice is for the upcoming year. So about 10,300 that still have to complete the survey. We have 740 students that will be homeschool students. We have 32,300 roughly students that will be face-to-face. That means they're coming to school face-to-face with teachers in the classroom, and roughly 30,600 for Lee Home Connect. So based around the Lee Home Connect and our Lee Virtual School, we're looking at about 41,000 students doing some sort of virtual modification, whether it's Lee Home Connect or whether it's Lee Virtual School. Those numbers, so I can share those numbers with you tonight, but as principals are working those numbers from the survey of students who hadn't responded, those numbers will change a little bit. Also, we have some flexibility with families that as they're going through orientation with Mr. Schilling at Lee Virtual School, if they decide that that's not really the model they want, we are letting them contact their school principal back at their home school and make a selection of either face-to-face or Lee Home Connect, because we really want to make sure families are happy with the choices that they're making for their students for the upcoming school year. So that's kind of where we are at the instructional models, and I'd be happy to take any questions that anyone has about that piece.
Do we have any questions for Dr. Spiro?
Yes. Dr. Spilo, I know the difficult task that you're having, you and your team, and I commend you on what you're presenting. I just want to go into record that it's a very tough time. I don't know whether you have contacted the teachers and what are the teachers' responses have been, and the bus drivers too, and the other staff that are involved in schools.
Well, first off, thank you very much. I think this is challenging for everybody. I think professors at college, the teachers in the classroom, I think everyone, this is a challenging time for all. Right now, our Human Resources Department, they have sent out a survey to all of our teachers last week, asking them of a preference choice of how they would like to come back to school for this upcoming school year. I do not have the results of that survey with me because that would be with the Chief of Human Resources, Dr. Pruitt, who has that information. So I know teachers had up to last night to complete that survey, so I'm sure they'll be looking at those numbers. And so yes, those numbers of how the preferences on teachers and how those teachers are going to be placed is very important to the success of any of the models that we have in place. It's going to be real important that our teachers feel comfortable with where they're working, and secondly, we have enough of the workforce to meet the needs of any of those instructional models. I believe she'll be doing the same thing for our support staff as well. And again, that's through the Human Resources Department, so I don't want to talk too much of that one because I'm not directly or intimately involved in that process.
Yeah, but as a follow-up, Dr. Spilo, if you allow me, Mr. Chairman, what if there's a conflict? The teacher does not want to be in the classroom, but you have already provided that some students who answered that they want to be in the classroom are there. And this is the class teacher. I don't want to be in the classroom, but the students have said they are. Are there penalties against teachers who say, I have accommodation, I can't come, but there are students to be taught? Don't you see a conflict there, Mr. Spilo?
So again, that's through the Human Resources Department, and part of the survey that the teachers filled out were exactly what you're talking about. They may ask for an ADA accommodation, and so there's a process that teacher would go through to get those accommodations put in place.
I do have a question.
All right.
Yes,
Please
sir.
state your name.
Yes, my name is Haitham Maho,
Okay.
and thank you very much for coming and clarifying the situation for us. And I just wondering if we do have, like what they say, a second wave. And, you know, we do have a situation where actually different states opened and then cases soared. Would we be able to bring our face-to-face to an online solution or another situation? And my second question is, and by that I'll close, is there a way that we can do it in the future, a mixed delivery system? For example, my son have ROTC, and since he's doing Leave Virtual, he cannot participate in anything which is physical or sports related. Maybe in the next year, hopefully we won't need it, but in case if we do. Thank you for your time.
And two excellent questions. Thank you. So the first question really is if the numbers could change and all of a sudden our health officials get with our superintendent and they say, we need to go ahead and shut the schools down, are we able to transition to this live learning that we have in place through Lee Home Connect for all students? And the answer to that is yes. We have enough Chromebooks available for every student to be able to go one-to-one. So he or she would be able to go home, have that Chromebook, and the lessons would continue to take place just like they currently would with our Lee Home Connect students. Meaning we would have 96,000 children all participating in live lessons with their teachers that they currently would have had in their building. So we are able to pivot and we are able to make that transition. And truthfully, that's through the support of our school board that's allowed us to get purchases of these Chromebooks in place, and through our information systems who had the forthright to see what was coming and making sure we had in place enough resources for our students. The second question you asked really is an interesting one because I see, and so does a lot of our team here at the district, a lot of potential in the future to use these models as we think about education differently. You know, and I'm going to give you for an example, and this is only my example. I haven't shared this with any members of my team, so I'm just sharing things that are in my head. But so, for example, our international baccalaureate programs or our Cambridge programs. Let's say I'm a student at another school that would like to have access to those programs, but my school currently doesn't offer it. Maybe, you know, in the future, maybe this design that we have now through some sort of virtual capability would allow all students to have access to a variety of different programs at a lot of different schools. And yes, there's a lot of moving parts to that, and that would take a lot of organization, but I think there's a potential to that. And so just like you were saying, sir, you know, could there be some sort of mixed model in the future? I think we have a blank canvas in front of us, truthfully, in the world of education. And we really have an opportunity to relook at the way we are doing education and be inventive and be innovative and making some changes that really benefit all children.
Lara Crispon, I just have two questions. I wanted to know if you could confirm the amount of kids that you said were homeschooled. I don't think I wrote that down correctly. And then secondly, I know you said that, you know, to pass the word around for those who have not responded. I believe the survey was closed on August 3rd. How would they go about responding if indeed that was closed?
Thank you very much for the two questions. One, the homeschool numbers as of this evening were 740 students. In regard to the 10,000 families that did not respond to the survey, schools, every individual school are having teams of people who are calling students that are on their list. So I'm a school, I get a list of students who I have not completed the survey, and they're personally reaching out to every one of those families to say, A, want to make sure that you understand what the instructional models are. B, which one of those did you really want to make sure you chose for your family, and trying to make that personal contact. Because again, we want to make sure that our families are comfortable with the choice that they're making for their student.
All right, does that answer your question? All right. Dr. Mahmoud, also in conjunction with what Dr. Spiro said, when it comes to sports and leave virtual, students are still allowed to play sports and participate in those things at schools within their zone. So if you live, we'll say in the East Zone, you have to go to student assignment, and you say, my son wants to do ROTC or he wants to play football, they will then assign you a school to play for. It's called the Tim Tebow rule. You can't just pick a school that you want to play for and then go to virtual school for academics, so that there's no advantages given to those schools because of certain athletes. But that is an opportunity if he wants to participate in some extracurriculars that he still can by going through student assignment. All right, any other questions for Dr. Spiro?
I would be interested in hearing from Ms. Betsy Vaughn where the board is in this respect in the opening.
Okay, what do you mean where we are in
Well, what Dr.
the
Spiro talked about.
athletics or about?
No, the general, anything about the reopening.
Oh, well, I think the staff has done a great job in getting things in line. I'll be honest, I do have some concerns, and actually sports is one of my big concerns, what we're going to do, and we're still waiting on some more guidance with that. The other thing that's been an ongoing question, I think probably Dr. Spiro remembers when I asked this way back when we had the pandemic task force, and it has to do with those hands-on kinds of subjects, and I think that's really going to be something very difficult to solve. But I mean, the board is, I think, all of us. Well, I'm not going to speak for all of us. I believe that the board is with all of this. That we're all very supportive. But I know that each of us has our own individual concerns, and bottom line is we just want to keep both our students and all of our staff members healthy. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, it does. And just want to commend you and Mr. Dr. Spiro, because this is a very difficult decision to make. You can't say students stay home. At the same time, there's the safety to be concerned. They hate to be in the position of what you are, but I'm glad somebody has to do it anyway,
All right, thank you, Ms. Vaughn.
Yeah, I'm going to just want to, if I can respond to Ms. Vaughn. So Ms. Vaughn has been a great advocate for our technical education programs in particular. And, and she's asked me a lot, and because I'm glad she does, because it's another driving factor is, what about our classes that are our technical education courses? And so what our director of technical education does, Rita Effing, what she did with her teachers, that she works with. So they've actually rewritten the pacing guides. So for the first quarter, it's more of the philosophy, a little bit about the soft skills. And that way into the second quarter, we're hoping that, we can open up a little bit more and get more kids back and do a little bit more in the hands-on piece, during that second quarter. So I know behind the scenes, we're trying really hard to provide those opportunities for students so that they're not lost. So still give them the skills, but then a plan for in the future to allow them to do the practical piece, that practical application back when we could do it face-to-face. So I have not lost sight of that, Ms. Vaughn, and then we continue to work on that. So I appreciate that.
No, and you know me well enough that I'll continue to ask. But
Yes, ma'am.
it's a thorny issue on how you do that, and all of this may become moot because I watch way too much of the 24/7 news, and today I was hearing things about what's happening in September, October, and we're all just crossing our fingers and our toes and everything else that things get better. And again, everybody wear a mask, and so should
All right. In the sake of time, we're going to move on to our
Mr.
next
Chairman,
person.
You have
Yes.
a hand, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Williams has a hand up in the chat box.
Oh, yes, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Spiro, for being here and addressing the reopening. The two questions I had were the extracurricular. What are we doing about those? What programs will and won't be available? I mean, just 30,000 feet level is fine. And then how about like after school programs and before school programs? Are those going to be implemented in any way? And then I do have one final question, and it goes to what Ms. Vaughn said on the interactive. I know for like biology, for instance, they have computerized labs that you can do for biology. Most of the times they take 3 times as long to perform the same task, trying to figure out the computer programming on it to get it to do what you want it to do. And the same way with chemistry. How are kids going to get those advanced scientific skills in a virtual learning environment?
Thank you, Mr. Williams. So first, clubs and sports will still be taking place. So those will still happening at our face-to-face right there at the school. Before and after school programs are also still taking place as well. So all of those normal structures that in place, those are happening. In regard to, virtual applications and how our kids are receiving that education. So yes, part of that teacher task force that I was talking to you about, we have teachers at the high school level, for example, some of those upper level courses that you're referring to that are on that task force that are providing that guidance on how we can get those high level activities and questions into the hands of students. So those application skills that you're talking about, so that even our Lee Home Connect students will still get the same rigor that they would as if it was face to face. So that task force is still working on those pieces, and that is a piece for all of us that we want to make sure we have in place. That the quality, is a high level of quality that we're going to be providing our students, which is why we felt it was extremely important to have that teacher point of view, those that are the practitioners in the field that can help guide these last pieces about what are best practices put in place. And yes, there are some applications that can be used, and it's okay if they take a little longer. Some of the things we talked about is slowing down a little bit so that we could do it well. And so if we have to do a lab that allows a student to comprehend multiple concepts and be able to synthesize that information and then reuse that because it now becomes part of their knowledge, then it's okay to slow down so that we can make sure that he or she really obtains that knowledge.
Mr. Chairman, I know you're in a hurry, but I wanted to just say, move it. I know I'm getting support from some of my members that Dr. Spilo, Ms. Vaughn, I think EDAC would be in support of whatever you're doing. We feel good what you're doing. I know you're putting the priority on the safety of both the students and the teachers and the bus drivers first. If anything comes along the way, I'm sure you have steps in place to make sure that things work out well. We don't want to lose any child or any teacher or anybody, and you have our support, and I want to move it, that we support you and support the board in that respect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Peter. All right. Any other questions for Dr. Spiro before we move on? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Spiro. Thank you, Ms.
everyone.
Vaughn. All right, Ms. Gordon. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, for the purposes of the record, if you don't mind indulging me for a second, to be clear, was Dr. Dianui's statement, he said he moved it. Is it his intention to turn that into a motion, or he was just making that as a statement?
I would prefer it's a motion.
Okay. Okay, so what is your motion, Dr. Peter?
My motion is that EDAC is in support of the team that is working on the school reopening, and with the board, whatever they're doing, we support, we respect it, we are in support of that.
Okay. Do we have enough members to carry a vote for a motion, Mr. Eady?
Yes, sir. The quorum requirements were not in place for the summer meeting, but if they
Okay.
were, we had the majority of the board present. If your
Okay.
motion moves forward with the second and the vote, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So there is a motion on the floor to provide our support to the district and the board to continue their work that they're doing towards the reopening plans. Am I saying that correctly, Dr. Peter?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I don't understand the motion.
Oh, can I repeat it? The motion is EDAC, after listening to Dr. Spilo and Ms. Vaughn, is in support of the steps they have taken in place for the safety of our students towards the school reopening.
I think Mr. Peter is trying to have a record of the support from our committee, just put into the minutes for the meeting.
You put it well, Mr. Chairman.
Does that help, Ms. Hiscon? Does that help? Okay. All right, so the motion
Thank
is,
you.
oh, you're welcome. So the motion is on the floor. Is there a first for the motion?
Yes, I'd like to support the motion or second it.
Please state your name, Dr. Mahmood.
My name is Haitham Mahmoud. I'd like to second the motion.
Okay. All right, so we have I think we need a first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, sir.
Is Peters the first?
Yes, sir. Your motion is on the floor. It's been seconded. So you're now for discussion.
All right. Ms. Carroll, did you get what you needed for the first and the second?
Yes, I have it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, all in favor of the motion on the floor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
John Williams.
Okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Gordon, you're up. Are you ready to share your screen?
I am. Good afternoon. Let me go ahead and share. Does Jared have to stop sharing, or can I just go ahead and share?
You should have it.
It's all yours.
Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Courtney Gordon. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I am the GIS planner for the school district of Lee County and project manager for the elementary proximity plan. We're here tonight to provide you a brief overview of the elementary proximity plan. In order to help facilitate this project, we have hired a consultant, Davis Demographics, who has numerous years of experience in these types of projects. Joining me tonight, we've got David Cates and Chris Melendez from Davis Demographics. Before I turn it over to them, I'm going to briefly outline the project goals and timeline. And before I get started, there will be an opportunity for some questions at the end. So the Elementary Proximity Project, the main goals of this project are to create smaller school zones to minimize transportation, enable parents to choose schools closer to home while maintaining equitable and diverse enrollment. A brief overview of our timeline. From March to May of this year, Davis Demographics compiled GIS data, that's Geographic Information Systems data, from Lee County and various municipalities. They also completed 10-year forecasts. David will go over all of this in much more detail. In June, the core project team and Davis Demographics started working on initial boundary scenarios. In June and July, we shared updates with the district stakeholder group, which consists of key district staff and a community stakeholder group, which is made up of diverse members of the community, including representatives from civil rights organizations, cultural and ethnic heritage groups, nonprofit organizations, planning organizations, and municipalities. We will be sharing the initial scenarios with these groups beginning mid to late August, just a couple weeks actually. And in November, we anticipate sharing these initial scenarios with the public. In October, we can expect to begin revising the 10-year forecast based on updated data. And in January of 2021, we anticipate revising the scenarios based on the updated 10-year forecasts. In March of 2021, we plan to present the revised scenarios and maps to the public. And in July of 2021, we anticipate making a final recommendation to the board. And our goal is to implement this in time for the 2022 school year. And I'm now going to hand it over to David Cates from Davis Demographics, who will go over all of this in much more detail. And again, I'd like to mention that his company has many years of experience with projects like these.
Thank you.
Hi there. My name again, she mentioned David Cates with Davis Demographics. Christopher Melendez is on the line as well. He's co-managing this project with me. Our company is a facilitator of these meetings. I myself have 25 years experience doing this with school districts all across the country. And as Courtney mentioned, we use GIS, a Geographical Information System, to put data together, special data sets. I'll be sharing some screen captures of this to give you an idea if you're not familiar with this. We spent 3 to 4 months researching all your active and future residential development. I actually went out there in February and in March before the pandemic hit and visited the different sales offices and met with certain municipalities to get the full picture of what's going on in your district now. And we also roll this out into a 10 consecutive year student forecast. So we need to know what's going on now and in the future. And then we go through a process called geocoding, where we take a snapshot of your student data from each October. So we have it from October 2019 and the previous 3 years. And you'll see in a moment, those show up as dots on the screen. And we have information behind all those dots as to what grade they're in, what school, and other data fields as well. So we did complete a 10-year forecast a few months back. I've shared it with the district, the board, and the committee so far. We've had 4 meetings with the committees so far up to this point. We will be having at least 2 more next week. And we initially established the data and criteria we're using to look at the equity and diversity, being able to check these smaller zones or proximity areas. And we also have those 10-year forecasts to look at each incremental year. Is the area declining or growing? And I'm going to walk you through the methodology here and how we went about those forecasts. Next slide. Courtney. It's coming through. There we go. Okay. So this is a screen capture of areas that we call study areas. These are small neighborhoods. Those numbers you see are unique identifiers. We have a total of 1,149 of these individual communities or areas. We try to look at concentration of a number of students, trying not to exceed 100 K-12 kids per area. We also incorporate, as you can see, kind of the street network. Your district has a lot of water features. We want to make sure we incorporate that as well. We have lot lines or parcel lots from the county, which are displaying on the screen. We look at those as criteria too. And we also incorporate your existing boundaries, your subzones. And also we looked at the 22 planning communities that your county has broken your district into. And for each of these 1,149 neighborhoods, we run a 10-year forecast. So we know exactly how many K through or PK-12 students are in each of these areas, and we will roll out a 10-year forecast for each of these future areas. Next slide, please. And this is a flow chart that kind of shows our methodology and how we do our forecasting. So on the kind of the first column on the left there, it says birth data. This is what we use to estimate incoming kindergarten class sizes each year. We look historical birth data, students born more or less 5 years previous becomes 5 years later as kindergartners. We do correlations to look at where they have been in the last few years or last even 10 years, and estimates on for the next 5-10 years as well. The middle section, the mobility factors, those are where we look at the historical student data. We look at those October snapshots I mentioned, and we compare previous year's snapshots. We want to look in communities where there's been no residential development. We want to see what trends are happening in those established, built-out communities or neighborhoods. And that's the mobility, where that looks into various factors like housing resales is a major contributor, movements from apartment migration, maybe dropout rates to high school level, incoming kids coming from private parochial to your public schools. Those are captured in the mobility factors. And on the far right, this is where the new development comes into play. I mentioned we researched for at least 4 months all of your current and known future new housing units that are going to generate students. We call factors student yield factors, or also known as student generation rates. We calculated those as well for your district by your planning communities, looked at units built within, let's say, the last 5 years, and we know the students that are coming out of there, so we can do what's called a yield factor or a generation rate, so we can apply those to the future units and estimate future students coming in to your district in certain years and certain areas of your district. Those all get folded together into our student projections. Next slide. All right, and again, you can see those study areas, the same right around your district office I showed you earlier, but now we have some of the footprints of your current, active, and future residential developments. We put in these polygons, and each of these polygons has a list of a lot of information. As I mentioned, we visited sales offices. The ones we couldn't visit, we called. We spoke to developers. We met with or spoke with city and county planners. So we covered all of our bases all across your county. But we take those you also see those blue dots on the screen. Those are those what I call geocoded or mapped student data. Just so you know, I like to throw this out to people. They might not realize what GIS is, but most everybody probably on this call today has done some form of mapping or geocoding or GIS, and you didn't know it. Whenever you go on your phone, you type in an address, and it gives you the best, quickest way to get there. Inherently behind all that is GIS. We use the same similar software to do the mapping, so we know exactly where the kids live offset on their streets, so we know where they live in relation to their schools or their boundaries. So we have all that, and those get factored into the mobility, as I mentioned, with the resales and the apartments, and as the students progress through the grades each year. We have all the development, and as I mentioned, we met with all your municipalities. Next slide, please. And these are just quick little screen captures. I just picked East Zone 2 as an example. You can see on the left, that lists your development for that particular zone. We have information behind all those polygons, a phasing of units for each year, type of units, information like that. In the middle, you see the snapshot of where your students are located. Those orange dots on that map show where your student locations are. Mostly the center point of East Zone 2 is a good part of Lehigh Acres right there, we highlighted. And on the right, those are another example of the study areas, those neighborhoods of concentrations. The smaller the study areas, the denser the area, the larger, the more less dense or more rural maybe the community is. And these all can overlay on top of each other, but I just kind of single them out so you can look at them individually. It gets a little cluttered if you turn them all at the same time. Next slide, please. All right, now this is a little example of how we come up with those student generation rates, or how many students are going to come out of new housing. I zoomed into a particular housing project here. We know by the parcel information that your county has, and we have a copy of, excellent data. It tells us what type of units, how many units, the age of the units. So these are highlighted in orange, the units that were built within the last 5 years. And as you can see with those dots, this is an example of that overlay. We know where all your students live, so we can get a very exact yield of what's coming out of each of these projects by the number of units, when they were built, and whatever grouping of kids we want to look at, elementary, middle, high school. On this example, I just kind of grouped them for simplicity's sake, and we're looking at K-12. So the highest yields we have found in your district is in the Lehigh Acres area, and that's a yield of 0.509 K-12 kids. And what that means, for every 100 units built in the Lehigh Acres area, you're generating roughly 51 K-12 kids. And the next highest one you can see on my list is Cape Coral, which generates a lot of students out there. But as you can see, their yield is 0.303. So every 100 units built there is roughly 30 K-12 kids. So it's a much higher yield. They're not building as much as they are in Lehigh as they are in Cape Coral, but yet if they did, you can see how much more students would be coming out of Lehigh Acres. The district-wide average, just to give you a perspective, is 0.218, or 22 kids for every 100. So you can imagine there's a lot of communities in your district that are much lower than the 218 in order to make that be the average. Next slide, please. And this is, again, the 30,000 foot level, as I heard someone mention. This is what we're projecting over the next 10 years, a little over 10,200 PK-12 students, which is in correlation to what you've grown in the last 10 years or so. It works out to be about 12% growth. And I just broke it down by the east, west, and south. So you can kind of see most of the growth is happening in the east, but yet pretty well distributed among your three major east, west, south zones, to give you a little perspective. Next slide, please. So now that we've done the forecasting part, now we're going to look into some of the data that as we come up with these smaller zones, how do we check or test the data with some of this, with the diversity and equity that we're going to be sharing with you in a moment. So when you go to the next slide, how do we track these or model? In terms of equity, you can see in the pictures there, I have little bullet points here. In terms of maybe special programs, obviously as these areas are smaller, we have to look at what schools are in these smaller zones, what do they offer. We have to make sure when this is all done that everyone has access to certain programs. We'll be looking for that. We'll also be looking at using socioeconomic factors. I'll be sharing in a few slides here. How do we kind of test the diversity and equity? We'll show you how we do that as well. And it will be up to district staff once we're done and we come up and the boundaries are approved to make sure that there's the proper number of programs available to everybody in the district in these zones. So next slide, please. Okay, and this is I know there's a lot of words on here, but this is kind of a summary slide of the data and information we're going to be compiling and sharing and testing, if you will, these new boundaries, smaller boundaries and zones. First and foremost, we look at the 10-year forecasts. We want to make sure that we have the proper capacity at your existing schools for these areas. So we're looking and really focusing on that as the number one thing to make sure we can house the students. But on the student files, we have these 5 data layers or data fields. The FSA level, we have the test scores, the scores of 1 through 5, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. We have the 2019 most recent data to look at. We'll look at that information. We also look at LEP or language efficiency. That's available on the student data. Direct search status is also another way of students applying for free and reduced lunch. We have that updated from the 2019 data, most recent. If need be, we have the ethnicity information of the students on their records. We also have their special day class or the exceptional student education programs. We could look to see the percentage of students in those programs because they're put in special self-contained classrooms, and we have to make sure we have to be able to have the room to house those students in those areas. We also have supplemented this study by using what we call geographic reports, where we can look down to as small as the study area level or as large as one of your subzones. And we can look at current and future population counts. The same thing for the households, current and future in those areas. The median household incomes along with their values. There's an indicator in there called a diversity index, where no one will achieve 100% diversity, but the score would be 100. No diversity would be a score of 0. That's not going to happen either. But typically the numbers are 50%, or I shouldn't say percent, a score of 50. The higher the number, like in the 60s or the 70s, are areas of high diversity. We'll be checking for that as well. I'll be sharing some of these with you. The Housing Affordability Index, I'll go over that in a moment, and same thing with the percent towards mortgage. So let's go to the next slide and I'll share some of these with you. The housing information, as I mentioned, Housing Affordability Index, HAI. 100 is kind of like the benchmark where it's comfortable or it's very affordable, not very affordable, but affordable. As the number is higher than 100, it's more affordable. And as the number is below 100, it's the lesser affordable. So if you look back 2010 for the whole US, to give you an idea, that was right a year or two after the market crashed, the housing market bubble burst. So the index showed that very high affordability of 158. 8 years later, nationwide, it kind of repairing itself, if you will. The number is getting closer to 100, not quite as affordable. Housing prices were going up at that point. And just to give you a perspective for your county, as of last year, your index level was about 106. This is for average for the overall county as a whole. We'll be able to get this information down to your subzones or even your future zones. We could be able to look at these indicators as well. Next slide. And this also is another good indicator. It kind of correlates with the previous slide, that what percentage of a household's income goes towards mortgage. If you look at the bottom there, that typically it's maybe about a third or a little less. It's when you get above that, like in the high 30s or even 40%, that was the danger zone we were all experiencing in 2007, 2008. More than 40% of your income going towards mortgage. But you can see the district-wide average is about 18% in your county. It's about 22, but we will have very specific information for your smaller districts as well to be able to check these indicators. Next slide. So what we're going to be doing, as you can see on the screen here, these are a snapshot of some of your 22 planning communities of your district's been broken up into. So we have not only your overall district-wide information, we have them by your subzones, we have them by your planning communities, and then of course, ultimately, we're going to get these smaller proximity zones we'll be able to check all different indicators for what your district-wide benchmark is compared to each of these areas. So we just started doing initial scenario work with the core group of district staff in June. We're about to unveil or share an initial scenario with the district stakeholders and the community stakeholders next week. And that'll start the process over the next few months after that, kind of adjusting or tweaking these zones, looking at the numbers, looking at the indicators, and then ultimately, if we saw on the timeline by November, unveiling to the overall general public as well. So that's kind of the steps we take. And the concept we're trying, or the whole purpose of this study, as mentioned before, smaller areas to cut down on transportation, but doing our best to always look at making sure that they're equal and diverse in these communities. That's our goal with this project. I think that's the last slide. Is that the next slide? And I'd like to open up for any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Cates? Thank you for the information, by the way, Mr. Cates. It's very informative. Gives a good background on what was done and how we reached where we are right now.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Gates, thank you so much. I think you provided some very good information. I've done a lot of thorough research. And what I keep hearing again and again, and by the nature of this very committee, diversity is very important to you. But I got a note here that I don't know how diverse Davis demographics is. I know they are concerned about diversity. What about your team? I think you're the project manager.
Yes.
So how is your team? Your team, because you're shown by how diverse is your team? That's what I'm asking.
Well, the gentleman that's co-chairing this with me, Chris Melendez. I don't know, Chris, are you there to speak, or can you speak?
Yes, I'm here.
There he is. And I don't know if he shows his video. Just so you know, I mean, we have, there's altogether about 20 of us in our firm. Not all 20 people are going to be working on this particular project, but I probably had 4 or 5 different people with different backgrounds, different age groups, different ethnic backgrounds. I don't know if I get very specific. Some people are not present on this presentation, but Mr. Melendez speaks Spanish fluently. He has a different background than I do on there, but I don't know if you had specific questions towards that. If you want to.
No, well, let me just put it this way. Do you have people who look like me, for example?
We do. To be honest, we have one member of our I said we have 20 people in our company that are that. We also don't forget too, we are working very closely with your district staff. So it's not like we are the only ones driving this. I might be facilitating, but we're all working as a team. So even though it's not me projecting or my company projecting our thoughts, it's a collaboration with your district staff as well. So I just want to make that clear as well.
All right. We have
Do you mind if I interject for a minute? This is Courtney, the GIS planner with the district. Just to address the question a little bit more, is I would like to mention that community stakeholder group that I had mentioned earlier during my introduction is a very diverse group of members that we feel represents the community, that Mr. Edie had input on that as well. Again, there are members on that community stakeholder team that have input on this project that are representatives from civil rights organizations, cultural and ethnic heritage groups, nonprofits, planning organizations, municipalities. So that group itself is also very diverse. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Gordon. There's a question in the chat box from Mr. Blakely, Dr. Blakely. You shared that your process and system tests diversity and equity. How would your team define diversity and equity when looking to test these indicators?
Like I said, this is a work in progress. So I listed at least the data fields we're looking at. I don't have right in front of me all the information. We could follow this up we have compiled quite a bit of data that we have shared with the district staff and some of the committee members. And we'd be happy to share those with you. I don't have them right in front of me to be able to throw all the numbers at you, but of those fields I showed you in there, there are explanations of what those different categories are. I mentioned a diversity index. That index is mostly based ethnic and racial on that particular one. A score of 60 to 70% is very diverse. The higher the number, the more diverse. We can share information with you where you can see not only your district-wide, but your individual communities and your subzones and where they are. Obviously, as you get into smaller regions, that's what we have to check to make sure that we're doing our best to look at whatever category we want to look at. There's socioeconomic factors I listed before. There's others that are a part of my packet, if you will, that we can share with you, and you'll be able to hopefully look through it and see all the different indicators that we use.
Right.
And if need be, I could come back at another time and walk you through those in more detail.
Well, what I'll suggest is that if we have further questions about the data that was presented, can we forward those questions to Ms. Caro, and then she can compile the list, and then she'll forward those questions to you so that you can get a comprehensive look at what we want to find out. You can answer all at once.
Yes.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I've got a question. Sean Williams.
All right. I just want to make sure before you go, Mr. Williams, just want to restate that if you have additional questions about Mr. Cates' information he presented tonight, please forward your question to Ms. Caro so she can compile a list and then give that list to him so that he can answer all your questions individually so that we get everything you were looking for.
Okay, I was just wondering about the housing data, where you pulled that from. Because we're pretty asset limited, income constrained community. We have a government program in place now where all of our children are on free and reduced, actually free lunches because our poverty rate is over 70%. And we have several homes that are paying over 58% of their household income in housing alone. So I don't know that the mortgage cost numbers that you provided, I'm wondering where those fit in. Where did you pull those information?
Well, first, let me make clear that those were very general information I shared today. That is county-wide or US-wide. But we do have very specific data down to your neighborhoods, maybe not down to those study areas, but at least down to your 22 planning communities. And you are absolutely right. There's parts of your community that are completely different than others. We don't want to just say that it's all this same level. There's some that are much higher, some that are much lower. That, as I mentioned, I could share with you the information packet we have put together, where you'll be able to see ones more closer to you were describing. And you have other parts of your community that are very expensive homes, but also people can afford a little bit more. Maybe it's on the islands or other parts of your, maybe in Fort Myers and some of those planned out communities. So every part of your county has a lot of different type of housing going on and being built at the same time. Now, as I mentioned before, the new housing information, we did visit and talk to those developers and salespeople recently. As far as the Housing Affordability Index, the reports from a company called ESRI, ESRI, they're international.
Yep.
Not only do they do the GIS work and have the software tools that we use, but they have worldwide demographic information that's available down to those study area levels or as large as your entire district. So we pull that information from there. They pull from census and other demographics resources. And I could provide that information for you as well, where you could look it up and they'll give you all the background information.
And then I just had one other question, and that was, which community groups did you consult with?
Are you talking about in the community stakeholders group?
Yes.
I'll let Courtney, if she wants to, or we have a list of how many, 28?
Yes, Courtney Gordon again. I want to say there's about 28 people on there. I don't have the list handy at this moment, but we worked as a team and also with Mr. Edie and some other individuals to come up with some groups. One individual is a representative from the NAACP. We have some planning organizations. I would be happy to share the list if that's permitted. With folks. I'm not sure if that's permitted. This is my first time attending this meeting, but if I'm allowed to do so, we could share that.
Mr. Williams, if you would add that to the list of things that we send to Ms. Carroll, and then we'll make sure, we'll send it out that way and to make sure we abide by all the proper rules. And then if need be, Ms. Gordon, Ms. Carroll will get in touch and get that list from you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right, thank you again, Mr. Cates, for your presentation, and thank you, Ms. Gordon,
Chair,
for providing the
can
information.
I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm confused. If we know as a district that we have a poverty level so high that we are getting free and reduced lunch for our county, and this agency that you're consulting with is telling us that's countywide we're at 22%, which is only 30% of our income, there's a difference there. Do you see the disparity there? So my concern is how accurate is this organization reflecting our community, and how are we to make sure that when we're reflecting the community, we're doing it accurately? So that I have concerns about this company. I'd like to hear more about.
Well, when we share the information with you, we'll give you the opportunity to look it over by your community levels and see be able to get your input on what is, if it's accurate or not. I think it is. We work for all districts all across the country using this information. I can't speak, I don't know if some of the staff can, I know that your entire county does receive free and reduced lunch, but it doesn't mean the entire county is at that level. I don't know how and why or what percentage. I know not 100% of your district is at that level, but I know they granted it to your entire county. So I don't know if it's quite as the disparity between the two is really.
We do have some schools in the district that do not receive the full free reduced lunch packages that other schools receive. Initially, this program started out with free and reduced lunch, and then it proceeded to reduced lunch. Free lunch. So I'm not sure what the levels are that qualifies for the school to receive free lunch and all the students receive free lunch. I'm sure the information is out there, and then we'd have to compare that information to what was done by the Davis Demographics Group to see how they mesh. If I'm understanding correctly, I think that the numbers that he provided were an average for the county. Not saying that everyone is at that number, but with an average, you have some that are higher and some that are lower. So I assume that's how the number was come up with. And we'd have to look at what the district requirements are for those reduced and free lunches to see what percentage of the school has to be on a poverty level to get the full status. What does it take? So I think there's multiple factors that are included in coming up with those numbers. It's kind of hard to compare apples to apples when we don't have all the other information that goes with it. So we can look into seeing what it is for those numbers so that we do have a better comparison. But as it stands right now, I would add that to the list, Ms. Siscon, put that on the list to Ms. Carroll, and we can compile that full list and get those answers for you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please state your name.
I know there's a lot of questions, and I just want to find out if we have an opportunity to revisit this, because I have some questions myself. So
yeah, please state your name.
For the sake of time, I will yield those questions. I'll put them in the chat, but will we have a chance to revisit this at another time?
Yes, please state your name from Ms. Carroll. She's taking notes for us tonight. All right, thank you. Yes, Mr. Burns, we always have an opportunity to revisit these items. We do get presented a lot of information at these meetings, and we do need time to digest. And so if there's additional information that you would like to have, by all means, please send those questions to Ms. Carroll, and we'll go through the proper channels of getting the right people here to present and answer those questions. I'm sure Mr. Cates, Ms. Gordon will be more than happy to come back and answer said questions and get us what we need to know. We are discussing an important topic, and we did, like I said, get a lot of information tonight, so we may have further questions. I just want to make sure that we get them all together so that we can answer them all at once, so we don't keep going over, the same things.
May I
Mr.
say one?
Sorry. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Courtney.
All right.
Can I go ahead?
Oh, okay, Courtney Gordon.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add, and I'm fairly new to the district, but it's my understanding when David from Davis Demographics was provided the student data, just a reminder, we are going off of the 2019 data, and some of the information in that data with regards to the free and reduced lunch was when we were still taking in applications for that, which I believe we do not do any longer. Somebody else may be able to clarify that aspect, but I just did want to throw that out there, and we will be providing Davis with new data this coming up October.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. You are correct. The parents no longer fill out the free and reduced lunch forms.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. I really don't want to appear like I'm trying to embarrass David in any way, but I was looking at the website of Davis Demographics and leadership, their leadership and the support, and maybe it's not updated, but I didn't see anybody who looks like me. For a team that really does a lot of good work in the country and has a lot of diversity index is important to them. I do hope that you'll consider that making your team diverse is important for you too, to be appealing more. But I'm looking at your website and I see the whole team, leadership and support. I don't see anybody looking like me. I hope you'll consider that. I don't want to embarrass you, Mr. David. I think you're doing a good job, but I just want to throw that in.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Peter. Let's stay on task. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Gordon or Mrs. Gordon or Mr. Cates? Remember, please submit your questions to Ms. Carroll. We'll compile a list and we'll get the information needed to answer those questions in subsequent meetings. All right. Ms. Vaughn, it is your turn for our board liaison update.
There are a lot of things that I could say because we've been very, very busy with workshops, and we're having our first in-person meeting, action meeting next Tuesday. Actually, next Tuesday, that's tomorrow, since March. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff we've been doing, but the one thing that I did want to mention is starting next week, we are going to have a huge initiative, I guess you could say, an initiative, a program for mask donations. Now, the school district is requiring masks in our schools, actually in all district buildings now. And for the children who can't afford masks or forget a mask any particular day, we are going to be providing the non-reusable, oh, it's been a long day, I guess, non-reusable masks. However, this fund drive is going to be community-wide, and we are going to be collecting reusable cloth masks for the kids. So this is something where I have a rather ambitious goal of I'd like to see at least 50,000, which that's a lot, but we'll see. We have a great, generous community, and look for information next week. The team that I'm working with, and I think Mr. Malloy is on this. He's been a major person with this. Mr. Eby has contributed also with the team effort in finding drop-off locations, but all the information will be coming out either this Friday or Monday as we kick this thing off. So it will be a major drive for reusable masks in both adult and children sizes. And any of you who are involved in companies do donations, you will likely be hearing from us. Civic organizations, we're going to touch base with all the fraternities, the sororities, the civic organizations. So, and Mr. Malloy wanted me to remember, School Heroes Wear Masks is the title of the drive. So watch for more information on that. And that's all that I wanted to share this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Mr. Eady, do you have an update?
Yes, sir. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Malloy if he has any additional details he'd like to share. And I believe Ms. Duncan is in with us, and I yield the floor to her also.
Thank you guys for having me. Adam Malloy, Community Engagement. I just want to applaud both Dr. Spiro, Ms. Gordon, and David Cates. Those were very important topics, and certainly the importance of their information that they presented and the importance of EDAC were on showcase tonight. So I look forward, as both of those topics, school reopening and the proximity project, as we move forward with more community engagement plans. And Dr. Denui, you know that we're going to be reaching out in a number of ways on both of these topics in the upcoming months. Now, as a follow-up to some committee conversations, I would like to seek a committee liaison to work with staff and report back to the EDAC committee in relation to some engagement projects that we developed. There's a few that I've spoke with Mr. Eady about, including town halls as it relates to race and inclusion. So I would like a committee liaison to work with district staff, myself, and report back to EDAC as we develop these community engagement projects in the first and second quarter.
Mr. Malloy, how would you like to form that committee? What would you like EDAC to do?
If you could, maybe a volunteer liaison or a liaison, however that could work with us to show a connection with both EDAC and the community as we move forward on a few, I think, very important but projects that could really use the support of a committee liaison.
All right.
And Adam, so you're saying people can volunteer, or what do you have in mind?
Yes, he's saying that they're looking for volunteers.
And Adam, I don't know how many you need, but if you need, I would be glad to serve in that committee.
Thank you, Dr. Denui. I know with your help, we'll be able to tackle some really important stuff this semester.
All right.
You're most welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Malloy. And Ms. Duncan, you have anything?
Hi, good evening. So our focus right now, we're working on some handbooks for our administrators in the area of discipline and behavior and also attendance, and identifying some schools for the upcoming school year for an upcoming attendance campaign, knowing that that's an important part is making sure our students in school so that they can access resources and that education. So we're working with some specific schools right now in the East Zone on those projects.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Mr. Chairman, that's it. I want to thank the committee as always, as well as Courtney and David for their attendance. We wanted to make sure that EDAC had a conversation with our consultant as well as our GIS specialist in the very early stages of the proximity conversation. As we go forward, Mr. Malloy is also on the call. He's going to be doing some additional supports related to community engagement, but we wanted to make sure that you all were a very early part of this conversation. As you know, it's a major mission of EDAC to have conversations related to school assignment. Also in September, Mr. Chairman, there'll be a request, as we did, I believe it was the year before, to have individuals from EDAC serve as members of the Site Selection Recommendation Committee. And site selection is connected to whenever the district acquires property, there are representatives from this committee that serve as members of that. So that will be a part of the conversation request submitted from our school enrollment, student enrollment department. That'll be a part of September's meeting. So that is all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Eady. Okay, anything for the good of the order?
For the good of the order, Mr. Chairman, just like being EDAC, and this is coming to the end of the year, it's always important in terms where we are, and don't get me wrong here, that when we are hiring any groups like teachers or students or workers or companies, that diversity, equity, and inclusion is always an important consideration.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Peter.
Mr.
Mrs. Gahn?
My question is, we heard about the path back to school. Will there be support for teachers and students for mental health in light of just, how frightening this virus is? And I mean, we talked about raising masks for the children to feel safe, but also I think it's important that we have something in place for the students and teachers to emotionally and mentally feel safe while, we're going back to school.
Yes, there is a social emotional learning built into a lot of the curriculums within the schools. It was started last year within the schools, and I know it's being built into curriculums this upcoming year going forward. So I'm sure that, dealing with this situation is part of the learning process and part of what the students have opportunity to express themselves with. In addition to, for the teachers, there are multiple mental health opportunities for them to go and share and talk with therapists that are part of their benefits package that they get through the district. So I hope that helps answer your question. There are some things that are going on already.
And just one point, I don't know if Jess has something additional to share along with that. Part of, and I think Ms. Siscon might have missed that initial part of Dr. Spiro's conversation, but I heard him correctly. There's part of the teacher task force as it relates to reentry. Part of their conversation is connected to mental health and social emotional learning. I know myself, Jess, and Crystal, and a few other people sat on a reentry team that was specifically pulled together to put together a laundry list of resources to be shared with the administrators and in turn shared with the teachers to support mental health, social emotional learning, and school climate. So in addition to the things that the chair alluded to, there are also things from what Dr. Spiro talked about earlier from the reentry team from the teacher task force, as well as something that Ms. Duncan's department and divisions and student services put together. So I don't know if Jess, if that is a good way to kind of wrap it up, or please feel free to add something else in there if I left something out.
You just really nailed it. We have Lori Brooks and her team through school counseling and mental health have created a mental health toolkit and also some opportunities for teachers to embed some of that instruction into their courses with students. And then as part of the bargaining unit with the district, we just met with the Teachers Association, and they are working closely with HR to also develop resources and things for teachers, as well as what we're providing to students.
All right. Mr. Williams.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, not only with the COVID, but I think that there may be some trauma with, the Black Lives Movement. They've seen some horrible things. They're most likely going to maybe suppress that, but it could be somehow coming out in either their social interactions and the likes. And have any of the teachers been sort of filled in on that and sort of how to identify trauma and to address trauma and moving that into a positive instead of this trauma ending up negatively on students?
So the toolkit that was prepared isn't specific to COVID. We know there's a lot of things going on right now in the community, so it can be used for a number of things. Specifically, there are some COVID-related materials, but the training for teachers is centered around like a trauma-informed care approach. In addition, we've been working not just from a trauma perspective, but also with principals regarding the First Amendment rights of students, because as they come back to the building, although they are in school, they do have First Amendment rights as well. So we're just trying to prepare schools to make sure that students have those rights, but that they can still run orderly operations in their school, and that balance there. So we're working on the trauma end, but also on the First Amendment student voice end.
Thank you.
And Mr. Williams, to that point, myself and Crystal Torres Nunez are a part of those conversations, and we're in supplemental building out additional resources from a standpoint of how to approach critical conversations connected to trauma-informed care, but also connections with things that our kids have experienced and seen during the course of the summer. So we've been very much a part of that conversation. There's a section, Crystal Torres Nunez was a part of the section on culture within the school community. I was on the task force for social and emotional learning, and then we pulled our heads together, and so we have a supplemental toolkit to be shared with our principals as we go with nuts and bolts, kind of opening up the school year. So myself, Jess, and student services and academic services and legal, we've been tossing this around for a couple of months now, so we're definitely at the table.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Edie.
I have a question,
anything?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
When do the new year start for the committees? When do we reapply if you have finished your second year?
I
And
believe.
how do we do it?
I believe Ms. Thomas sent an email out to all the members who needed to be reappointed.
Sorry, I missed.
Did you? I believe an email was sent out to all of the members who need to be reappointed, Dr. Dianui. We can double check tomorrow. I know a couple of you should have gotten that email saying that you needed to reapply. This was prior to March. So probably sometime in April at our last meeting, she did send that out. There are some transitions now, as you noticed, that Ms. Thomas is now in the board office. So a lot of the work connected to advisory committees are being transitioned over to our board attorney and her assistant, Johanna, at the moment. So you should be getting additional correspondence. If you have not gotten that link, myself and Tony and LaTanya will follow up. I see Dr. Hatham, he said he did receive his. So I'll make sure if you need to get it again to let you all know. But if you were up for reappointment, you did receive an official letter from Ms. Thomas saying that it was up. So if you have an opportunity, if you think that affects you, you can go ahead and check online and complete that application. And if necessary, between myself and the recording secretary, we'll forward that notification out to you. As I stated, there's transition in the board office. It's a little different this year because all of us are meeting throughout the summer. In prior years, there was an actual break. So you kind of knew that, okay, we stopped in March or we stopped in May, and we'll pick back up in September. Since we met for the duration of the summer, it might have gotten a little fuzzy for some committee members. But we'll make sure you get the notification again for those who might not have received it if your term is up for reapplication.
I would appreciate that. I don't have it yet, so as soon as possible, please send it to me.
Okay, I just want to confirm, did you not, you said you did not receive it?
Yep, I don't remember receiving it yet.
Okay.
I would like to point out that I got an email with my name, Dr. Nadu, and Ken Burns with a calendar invite to this meeting with a link. But when Ken Burns and I clicked it, it said it was an invalid ID. And some of the people on the email didn't have their emails in it. It wasn't a Zoom link like we normally get in an email from I know we had a shift with the secretary, correct? So I would just like to point out that perhaps the lack of people in the meeting tonight may be in relation to a problem in communication with the Zoom link. And please make sure that I'm on the next month's. Thank you.
So am I understanding you correctly? Are you saying that you did not receive the link from the recording secretary?
I did not. I had to get the link to come in here from Mr. Williams, and I sent the link to Mr. Burns, and that's why we were late.
Okay.
But there were other names on the email, and it wasn't an official email. It was a Google Calendar invite. It was really weird. So maybe there is something going on with the email. I'm in fact not even sure if I have to reapply either.
Okay.
So,
Just
We'll
send that
have-
to all of us, yeah.
All right, Mr. Edie will look into it, and he'll give
Can we-
Ms.
can
Carroll
we do-
also.
I want to make sure we're clear, Mr. Chairman, for a second. So for the conversation, is there anyone else on the call? Ms. Siscon talked about Mr. Williams and also Mr. Burns, who did not
No,
receive.
Mr. Williams received the email. He
Right.
sent me the link and I sent it to Mr. Burns.
Okay.
We didn't get an official email like we had previously that said, you know, this is the link to the Zoom. We got a forwarded email of
I forwarded her the link
yeah.
through my EDAC email.
Okay. And then Dr.
And then
Danu.
she forwarded it to Mr. Burns. Mr. Burns didn't have the link either.
Okay, thanks for that point. As you stated, there was a transition between, so we'll just make sure if anything in that going forward.
Mine was just for the application, that's it.
Yes, sir. And yours was about the application. Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, anything else for the good of the order?
Yeah, I just had a quick statement. This is Chris Blakely. I know we've mentioned some community engagement opportunities that I feel that are very essential and critical, as well as our talks on mental, social, emotional learning. But I think in particular to this committee, I would just like offer it up to us to consider what is our approach to, you know, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, are buzzwords in our communities, but we need to continue to evolve into anti-racism work. So how are we preparing for anti-racism as we return to school, our culture responsive teaching? So I think dealing with COVID has realigned some of our priorities, but I think at the foreground should be our diversity, equity, inclusion. As much energy we give to COVID, we should be giving to diversity, equity, inclusion, because a virus that has been going on for the last 2 months has been going on for 400 years. So if we don't address those things with the same energy, we'll be in a revolving door. So I just want to make sure that we are keeping that at the foreground. Although these other things are important, we make sure that we keep diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism at the foreground as well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Blakely. Anything else for the good of the order?
I second Dr. Blakely's motion.
Thank you. All right, so is there a motion for an adjournment for this evening?
No, sir, you have item 10.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that there. Public comment. Do we have any public comment, Ms. Carroll?
I don't have any emails.
Okay. All right, so since there is no public comment, is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Please state your name, Dr. Peter.
Dr. Peter Young, yes. So moved.
Thank you.
Sean Williams.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Second. That was Dr. Blakely with the second.
Correct.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed?
Thank you.
All right, thank you all again for your volunteering. Thank you for your good input tonight. We got a lot of good information. Please, like I said, send your questions to Mrs. Carroll so we can compile a list, get those answers for you. And I look forward to seeing you guys next month. Have a good night.
Good night.